The phone call lasted exactly 7 minutes. On one end, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg, practically begging. On the other, Turkish President Erdogan, holding the entire Western alliance hostage. Sweden's NATO membership is non-negotiable, Stoltenberg pleaded. Then give me what I want, Erdogan replied coldly, or watch your precious alliance crumble. It was March 2024, and Turkey had just achieved something no enemy of NATO had ever managed, paralyzing the world's most powerful military alliance from the inside. But this wasn't an accident. This was the culmination of a 20-year strategy to transform NATO from Turkey's protector into Turkey's personal tool for global blackmail. This is the story of how one man outsmarted the entire Western world and made the United States dance to his tune. To understand how Erdogan broke NATO, you need to understand what NATO actually is: a protection racket disguised as a defensive alliance. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was created in 1949 with one purpose: contain the Soviet Union. Article 5 is the nuclear option of international law. Attack one member, fight all members. It's what kept Europe safe for 70 years. But Article 5 has a fatal flaw. It requires unanimous consent for major decisions. Every single member can veto anything. Turkey has turned this into a weapon of mass diplomatic destruction. Here's how the blackmail works. Turkey blocks critical NATO decisions until other members give Turkey what it wants: money, weapons, political concessions, or silence about Turkey's human rights abuses. NATO members can't expel Turkey because that requires unanimous consent too. Turkey can block its own expulsion. It's the perfect diplomatic trap. And Erdogan has been setting this trap for 2 decades. 2003. Turkey refused to let American troops cross Turkish territory to invade Iraq unless the US gave Turkey $30 billion in aid and guaranteed Turkish control over Kurdish areas. The Bush administration was furious but had no choice. They needed Turkey's geography more than Turkey needed their approval. Erdogan learned a crucial lesson. NATO members will sacrifice principles for strategic convenience. And Turkey's location, controlling access between Europe and Asia, makes it irreplaceable. 2016. Turkish military officers attempted to overthrow Erdogan in a failed coup. Instead of investigating Turkish democratic backsliding, NATO rushed to support Erdogan's regime. Why? Because Turkey hosts crucial NATO infrastructure. Incirlik Air Base stores US nuclear weapons. Turkey controls the Bosphorus Strait, the only route between the Black Sea and Mediterranean. Erdogan realized he could commit any atrocity, crush any opposition, silence any journalist, and NATO would protect him because they needed his geography. This is when Erdogan stopped pretending to be a Western ally and started openly playing both sides. 2017. Turkey bought S-400 missile systems from Russia, NATO's primary enemy. These systems are designed to shoot down NATO aircraft. Turkey integrated Russian military technology into NATO's defense network. The US threatened sanctions, expelled Turkey from the F-35 program, and demanded Turkey choose between Russia and NATO. Erdogan's response was brilliant. Why should I choose? You need me more than I need you. He was right. Turkey's strategic location trumped Western values every time. 2019. Turkey invaded Syria and directly attacked Kurdish forces, America's allies in the fight against ISIS. Turkish military deliberately targeted US Special Forces positions, forcing American troops to flee their own bases. Any other NATO member would face immediate consequences for attacking American soldiers. Turkey received a phone call asking them to please be more careful. Erdogan had successfully established that Turkey operates under different rules than other NATO members. Geography equals immunity. 2020. Turkey and Greece, both NATO members, nearly went to war over gas drilling rights in the eastern Mediterranean. Turkish and Greek warships pointed weapons at each other, while NATO headquarters pretended this was a misunderstanding. Erdogan was systematically destroying NATO's credibility by proving the alliance couldn't control its own members. But the masterpiece was still coming. February 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine. NATO unity was supposedly stronger than ever, as members rallied to support Ukrainian resistance. Except Turkey immediately announced it wouldn't impose sanctions on Russia, would continue trade relationships, and would block any NATO military aid that transited Turkish territory. While other NATO members sent weapons to Ukraine, Turkey sent diplomats to Moscow. Erdogan positioned himself as the neutral mediator between Russia and the West. This wasn't neutrality, this was opportunism. Turkey played all sides simultaneously, while other members sacrificed economically to support Ukraine. But Erdogan's greatest triumph was weaponizing NATO expansion against NATO itself. May 2022. Finland and Sweden applied for NATO membership in response to Russian aggression. Both countries met every technical requirement. Their militaries were NATO-compatible, their democracies were stronger than most existing members. But admission requires unanimous consent. Turkey immediately announced it would veto both applications unless its demands were met. What demands? Turkey wanted the US to sell them F-16 fighter jets despite Turkey's Russian missile systems. Turkey wanted Sweden to lift arms embargoes imposed after Turkey's Syrian invasion. Turkey wanted European countries to extradite Kurdish activists Turkey labeled as terrorists. Essentially, Turkey demanded NATO reward its bad behavior with advanced weapons and political concessions. The absurdity was stunning. Turkey was blocking Nordic countries from joining an alliance meant to defend democracy, while Turkey itself had become increasingly authoritarian. But it worked. The US approved F-16 sales. Sweden lifted arms restrictions. European countries began extraditing Turkish dissidents. Finland was allowed to join in 2023, but only after agreeing to Turkey's terms. Sweden remained blocked for over 2 years because Turkey kept adding new demands. March 2024. The phone call that broke NATO's credibility completely. Erdogan told Stoltenberg that Sweden's membership would only be approved if NATO members agreed to Turkey's updated security requirements. Translation: more money, more weapons, more political cover for Turkish authoritarian policies. NATO had become Turkey's personal ATM and diplomatic protection service. But here's the most shocking part. This strategy is working beyond Erdogan's wildest dreams. Turkey now receives advanced Western military technology while maintaining military cooperation with Russia. Turkey buys Russian energy while European allies freeze. Turkey attacks Western allies while remaining protected by Western security guarantees. Erdogan has achieved something no dictator in history ever managed. He's made democracy protect authoritarianism, convinced Western powers to fund their own strategic competitor, and turned a military alliance into a personal tool for international blackmail. The implications are catastrophic for Western credibility. China is watching Turkey's success and applying similar tactics. Beijing now demands concessions from countries that want to maintain trade relationships while criticizing Chinese human rights abuses. Russia learned from Turkey's playbook too. Putin realized he could commit atrocities and maintain Western partnerships as long as he controlled strategic resources Europe needed. Authoritarian leaders worldwide have learned Erdogan's lesson. Democratic alliances will sacrifice principles for strategic convenience. Geography equals leverage. Necessity trumps morality. NATO's expansion eastward was supposed to strengthen the alliance by adding new members committed to democratic values. Instead, expansion gave authoritarian members more leverage to block democratic initiatives. Turkey proved that NATO membership is a license for bad behavior, not a commitment to good governance. The alliance meant to protect democracy has become democracy's enabler. But the most damaging effect is on NATO's deterrent power. Potential enemies now know that NATO can't act decisively because any member can paralyze the entire alliance for personal gain. Article 5 was supposed to terrify enemies with the prospect of fighting 32 nations simultaneously. Now enemies know they only need to buy off one member to neutralize the entire alliance. Turkey has demonstrated that NATO's greatest weakness isn't military inferiority. It's decision-making paralysis caused by internal blackmail. So what's the solution? How do you remove a cancerous member from an organization designed to be permanent? Some NATO strategists privately discuss constructive ejection, making membership so uncomfortable that Turkey voluntarily leaves. economic isolation, military exclusion, diplomatic marginalization. But Turkey's geography remains irreplaceable. Losing access to Turkish bases and the Bosphorus Strait would fundamentally weaken NATO's position against Russia and China. Others suggest alliance reform, changing unanimous consent rules to prevent single-member vetoes. But that requires unanimous consent too, which Turkey would obviously block. The truth is that NATO has no mechanism for dealing with a member that exploits the alliance against the alliance's interests. The organization was designed assuming all members shared common values and goals. Erdogan proved that assumption was fatally naive. Turkey's success has inspired other authoritarian-leaning members. Hungary's Viktor Orban now regularly blocks EU and NATO initiatives until his demands are met. Poland's previous government used similar tactics. The Western alliance system is eating itself from within, consumed by members who exploit collective defense for individual gain. March 2024 represents a turning point, the moment NATO officially became Erdogan's personal tool rather than a genuine defensive alliance. The phone call that lasted 7 minutes revealed a 20-year strategy's ultimate success. Turkey had achieved something no external enemy could. It had destroyed NATO's credibility and unity from within. Erdogan didn't conquer the Western alliance. He corrupted it. And corruption is infinitely more dangerous than conquest because it's harder to recognize and impossible to defend against. The greatest threat to NATO wasn't Russian tanks or Chinese missiles. It was Turkish strategy. And that strategy has already succeeded beyond its architect's wildest ambitions. What do you think? Has Turkey exposed a fundamental flaw in alliance systems, or is this just brilliant realpolitik? The implications extend far beyond NATO. Every international organization now faces the Turkey problem. Share your thoughts below on how democracies should handle authoritarian allies who exploit collective security for personal gain. This isn't just about Turkey. It's about the future of international cooperation itself. If this deep dive into alliance politics revealed something mainstream media won't discuss, hit that like and subscribe. We analyze the power moves that reshape global politics while others focus on surface-level news. Until next time, remember, in geopolitics, your closest allies can become your greatest weakness if they understand your vulnerabilities better than you do.